that whole structure will be a complete coral ball or dome. These are not too big. They're like 1.5 meter wide, maybe 60 centimeter high, very movable. A diver can pick them up and place them somewhere. And then once they're overgrown, they become part of the coral reef. The good thing also is about it, the inside remains hollow. And that's the perfect place where fish and shrimps or cuttlefish or octopus can then be, lay their eggs, be safe from bigger predators.
Stick Your Neck Out, the weekly podcast of the Giraffe Heroes Foundation.
Because of this episode, I've been thinking a lot about the Austrian poet Rainer Maria Rilke. Because this episode is about the ocean. And me, myself, as Rilke once said, when anxious, uneasy and bad thoughts come, I go to the sea, and the sea drowns them out with its great white sounds, cleanses me with its noise, and imposes a rhythm upon everything in me that is bewildered and confused. Today I'm talking to Giraffe Hero Ali Allagholi. In his former life, he was working for IBM and Bank Sarasin, as well as managing a bar, having a comfortable lifestyle with, I quote him, all the toys and dependencies that come along when being a forerunner for the capitalistic system. This lifestyle, however, led to a burnout where his inner voice asked for a drastic change in 2008. Welcome, Aki, to Stick Your Neck Out.
Hello, nice to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Aki, can you tell us a bit more about this process? How was your life before 2008 and how did you get to the point to change your life so drastically? What kind of decisions did you take?
Well, I would lie if I would say that I didn't enjoy that certain lifestyle at the time. But as with anything, things change, and obviously the demanding side of my work increased, and it was not fulfilling at all. It was more like I had to deliver, and the delivering part was usually just something related to numbers or profits, or, it was a lifestyle that is very repetitive, and it always was the same. And after a while that you start thinking about it. Not that you have much time to think about it anyway, because when you are completely inside the system doesn't allow you to have much space to critical question who you are, what you're doing, where you're going. Does this make sense? Could there be an alternative? Could there be something that is, maybe less time intense or labor intense? So, this process never really came. And the process of change is something that we all should embrace at some certain point and not be afraid of. Everybody is afraid of everything nowadays anyway. But change doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that it's bad, Even though you go into a direction that you might not know, you might go into somewhere that is unknown to you at the point. But isn't that what life is all about? I lost touch with my inner self. I lost touch with nature. So the process of change, because it was so extreme, that lifestyle had to be dictated from the outside. And then it was painful. So change, nevertheless, will come in your life. So you might as well just embrace it. I then went on and said, I need to change. I left my job. I left my jobs, basically, and I started to travel. And that's when the real process of change then got initiated.
Yeah, but it needs a lot of courage to do so. I mean, to say, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. I have to do something new. Where do you get this from?
The ironic thing about this was because, when you work in a position where you have a good income, the ironic conviction of myself that I shouldn't be afraid to do that step into the unknown was that if it doesn't work out, I can always go back to the bank. because the bank is like the security safe haven. You work at the bank, especially in Switzerland. You work at the bank, you're safe, you're good, you made it, you don't have to worry about it. It's not like that anymore nowadays. Maybe it was 25 years ago, but nowadays it's not like that anymore. So I convinced myself to leave the bank. I was convinced that if I don't make it, if I end up completely broke, I can always go back and find a new job at the bank. But the point was, if you make that decision to leave the bank and you go out there and you start traveling and you feel the nature and you feel how it is to be liberated from these chains, you're not going to go back anymore. You just don't. Yeah, and that's what happened.
After this life-changing experience, you started focusing on your engagement on marine protection initiative. You got the experience acknowledged until you founded the Quarterlife.org, a Swiss-based environmental organization passionate for the ocean, operating worldwide to help protect, manage, and restore coastal ecosystems. In support of the International Year of the Reef, if I'm not wrong, Quarterlife started a new coral propagation project of the coastal waters of Frigate, Seychelles. How exactly was the organization Quarterlife born, and what do you exactly do?
Well, there's a few years in between leaving the bank and founding my own organization. Obviously, after leaving the bank and that lifestyle, I did a lot of traveling. Just, feel the other extreme, being stuck in one place and, just compensate for that. I did that for a few years, getting to a point where I realized that this is also a privilege that we have being born in the Western world, Europe in this case. We can always go back home, and we go to Africa, we go to India, and we take pictures of poverty, and we see that, and it's like, oh, this is terrible. We should do something about this. And then 2 weeks later, you're on a plane flying to Malaysia, and you go to a shopping mall in KL, and that's not. So I realized that I needed some purpose in the traveling. So what I did after that, I started to volunteer. I volunteered first with a NGO in Madagascar called Reef Doctor. That was my first great experience, and I have still very, very good relations with them. In fact, we're going to go have our first joint project together in January next year. Really looking forward to that. After that, I did my master's degree in Costa Rica. I did sustainable natural resource management, which inspired me to do more work together with the corals. And then I started to volunteer again for an NGO in the Philippines. Stayed there for 2 years, basically. After those 2 years, I realized I needed to do this on my own. Just working for somebody else that may not share the same values or inspirations or goals with you. I needed to do this on my own. So that was the point where I left that organization at the time. Right away, I started and founded Quarterlife.org. Then, my first project was launched, a very small one in Greece, actually. Ironically, that's where I am at the moment. And this led to another one in Jamaica. Then I was able to initiate another one in the Philippines. And that in the Philippines then got a little bit bigger as well, led to further projects in the Seychelles, in the Maldives, in Kenya eventually, and a few more to come. The one in the Seychelles is a very prestigious one in cooperation with Blancpain, which is a Swiss watchmaker. And they have a foundation, the Blancpain Ocean Commitment, who is, partially funding or completely funding environmental project related to marine protection and marine conservation, and in this case, marine restoration. Yeah, that's basically what I do. Like I said, administrative stuff, a lot of the things. I have a few folks that help me out with a lot of things, like the volunteer work, organizing this, everything that has to do with scientific stuff. I have somebody who helps me out there. Myself, basically, I want to be involved in the work itself all time. I don't want to become somebody who's just sitting behind a computer, organizing projects, preparing logistics and raising funds. I want to be there, out there in the ocean, attaching corals to structures, making sure that the corals that are so needed for the ocean as a baseline for food, baseline for security, baseline for protection, diversity and tourism, all that they're, come back where they should be and that are protected where they're still there.
For this project in the Seychelles, 800 storm-derived coral fragments, apparently named corals of opportunity, were transplanted onto 8 artificial structures at depth of between 5 and 7 meters. How does the coral healing process works, really?
Okay, that's a very good question. There are different techniques out there, obviously. What they all have in common somehow is if we do coral restoration in areas that are heavily damaged, meaning that, let's say, there was a storm that wiped out the complete coral reef, or there was an extreme bleaching event, meaning that all the corals died and maybe over the years they got eroded. And what the outcome is of these extreme weather events is that usually what you find on the ocean ground is a rubble field. These are small little white pieces of coral, the leftover of the coral structure, and they're loose. So you have to imagine a flat ocean floor with loose, small calcium pieces of dead coral. Mm-hmm. And nothing can grow on that for at least 1 or 2 generations of us. So like 25 to 30 years. What can initiate the healing process is that you place 3-dimensional structures that are very stable, so corals can actually grow or overgrow these structures. Now, the process is always the same, that all the techniques have in common. Then, they differ because, maybe different forms of budget are available or not available in most cases. Whatever material that you find locally can be used. The way we do it is we have these structures made out of rebar, that's pure steel. And they look like small little domes or like pyramids that the top is cut off. And what we do is we use these corals of opportunity, meaning like, they got from a storm, they got broken off and they lay in the sand. So we take them, we make smaller pieces out of it. And these small pieces, these fragments, coral fragments, we attach on these structures. And then we put the whole structure on electricity, meaning we have an electrolysis. It's called the mineral accretion technology from an anode that will send electrons to the structure, and with the chemical process on the structure, the pH level becomes higher, so the environment is more alkaline, which is in favor of growth of corals. With that is also a deposition of limestone, calcium carbonate. This means the building material for the corals is right there, so they don't necessarily need to do all that by themselves, which leads to faster growth. So the corals grow 3 to 5 times faster. They're more resilient in times of stress, and they have a build-up against future extreme weather events. So that's basically it.
Okay, so you put these domes, this kind of iron structure inside. Mm-hmm. You let them grow, and this iron stuff stays in the water, or you can just take it out. No, it has to stay in the water.
The structure itself initially is artificial, yes, but it will become completely overgrown with limestone, with calcium carbonate. Hence, it's not going to rust. It's actually the reverse. The reverse process is happening. As soon as you put the structure on electricity, the top layer of rust will completely disappear and you have a bare steel in the water. Then it slowly becomes overgrown with limestone, and the coral itself overgrows the structure itself as well. So that whole structure will be a complete coral ball or dome. These are not too big. They're like 1.5 meter wide, maybe 60 centimeter high, very movable. A diver can pick them up and place them somewhere when they're new. And then once they're overgrown, they become part of the coral reef. The good thing also is about it, the inside remains hollow. And that's the perfect place where fish And shrimps or cuttlefish or octopus can then lay their eggs, be safe from bigger predators, multiply as much as they can. And with that, with the coral reef coming back, also the fish stock comes back. So that's the whole idea.
How long does the healing process last? Are we talking about years, months, days?
Wow, it would be beautiful if we could do that in a few months. Imagine the one of the fastest growing coral species is one of the acroporas, and they grow maybe, let's say, 15 centimeters a year. There's others, the very slow growing corals. They don't go beyond a centimeter a year. So these coral reefs, they have been growing for thousands, if not millions, millions of years. They are very, very old, very, very old. It takes a long time. How it took millions of years to create the Great Barrier Reef or the reef around New Caledonia or the Mesoamerican reef. It took so much time. The reverse process destruction can be done in seconds, obviously. So if we would plant out a coral fragment just like that in that area, it would probably take at least 25 to 50 years to somewhat restore the reef again. Without technology, we can do that 3 to 5 times faster. So I would say within 5 years, we can have a decent result and saying like, hey, there was nothing here before because it was completely destroyed. But now we have these, decentralized little domes or microcosmos of corals with fish around it. And that then itself can be left by itself because, a storm will come, a triggerfish or a parrotfish will bite on the corals fall down, the current takes it to another place, they somehow get stuck and they naturally start to grow itself. So to be straightforward and to be very, very honest, if I would call myself somebody who restores corals, I would not really be very honest. The only thing I do is I initiate the healing process. I jumpstart that process and I give nature a helping hand so at some point it can heal itself and we can reduce the time of healing by jumpstarting that process.
Okay. This project in the Seychelles reefs, you are using the method of mineral accretion. We have been talking about that a lot, but there is another method you can use, and I think you did it also before, the nursery method. What is this about and which one is better?
So the nursery is not a different method of coral restoration. The nursery is just a different approach. And the approach is needed when you start to think about larger scale of restoration. To be honest, the project in the Seychelles has a decent size, but is not very big. So we place the structures there and we attach the coral fragments right onto the structures. Now, the project that we have in the Maldives, for example, the future outcome of that will be a restoration of 2 hectares, that is 20,000 square meters, which is quite a large area for coral restoration. It has never really been done before, but that's what we're aiming at. We want to do large-scale coral restoration. Now, imagine 20,000 square meters, and each of these mini domes covers 10 square meters. So you can do the math. We need a lot of these structures. We need about 2,000 of these structures. And each of these structures needs about 30 fragments. Hence, 2,000 times 30, that creates 60,000 fragments. It's very difficult to have 60,000 fragments right on the spot. You didn't want to have, you don't want to go out into the natural reef that is already under pressure and break off 60,000 fragments. Yeah. So what you do is you create a nursery. It's basically like a little garden underwater. And you have also structures. In this case, they're just table structures. And you use the fragments that you found and you attach it there. You let it grow, let's say 6 to 12 months. And once they have a decent size, you can harvest the corals. You chop them off, okay. each fragment again. Mm-hmm. And then you have a harvest of maybe 3, 4, 5,000 fragments. And these fragments you outplant at the restoration site. and then you have to wait for the next phase, and then you go back to the nursery, you harvest coral fragments again, you outplant them at their final destination, and so on and so forth. So a nursery is basically just a stock of corals that you can use to outplant when you do the restoration itself. The mineral accretion technology, in both cases, we use it with every structure. We have the mineral accretion technology, that's the support with electricity in the nursery, as well as the final destination where the restoration actually happens.
How do you manage to cover the cost for this, I imagine, quite expensive restoration and protection of the corals?
Well, there's several streams of income or inflow, so to speak, because income we don't really have at the moment. We have donations. People directly donate to our cause. The other way is through the projects. These projects sometimes are of interest for the private sector. For example, a hotel is interested to do coral restoration, let's say as a guest experience, for example, or they want to have a house reef that is, good for snorkelers, but it's not there because, maybe the coral reef has been destroyed while the hotel was built, or there was a bleaching event or whatsoever. And then it's basically just a job. We work for a hotel or a private financer, and the money that then comes into the NGO obviously stays in the NGO, and that money then can be used, for example, to initiate small scale or grassroots projects. I'm thinking about, for example, like a fishing community in the Philippines, then, they want to do something, then maybe, the costs are not extremely high there. Maybe we can then sponsor 5,000 euros for a project like that. The money stays within the organization and then obviously flows back into the ocean again. Yeah.
What is the biggest challenge you have or you are confronting because of the climate change?
Well, the heating up of the ocean, it's not really a very good thing for the corals. The biggest threat is basically, or the biggest question that we have to ask ourselves is, are the corals able to adapt at the same speed or at a higher speed to get used to the higher temperatures that the oceans are getting? The El Nino effect, which is like something that in the past, and let's say it's 15 to 20 years, happened every 5 to 7 years. It's a complete reversal of wind direction, current direction. There's hot water for a while, and it brought destruction. But destruction also led to adaptation of corals. For example, corals, like every 7 years, they got challenged with a heat wave, and they had to genetically adapt, and their offspring was a stronger coral reef than it was before. So that was a good thing. But these events are becoming normal. These events are not like every 7 to 10 years anymore. They are almost every year. There's a term, I recently discovered it by talking to scientists. They said, it's bleaching season. We never talked about a bleaching season. A bleaching season is something that it can't be seasonal. Obviously, there are regions in the world where once a year the water becomes so warm, and I talk about average temperature beyond 30 degrees, and everything that's beyond 30 degrees basically is fatal for corals. Mm-hmm. So the water stays warm. On average, 31, 32 degrees over the course of 3 months. The corals die, they bleach, and so on and so forth. And if that happens every year, corals have a hard time to adapt, because coral spawning, and I'm putting out another term, once a year, sometimes twice if the conditions are good, but once a year, corals do sexual reproduction, meaning they eject sperm and eggs. They create larvae, and these larvae then are taken by the current to other places, not too far. They settle down and they start a new coral. And out of that becomes a new coral colony. And that's just once a year. But if once a year we have the bleaching event, the corals are stressed, there's not going to be any spawning, there's no sexual reproduction, there can't be any offspring that are getting used to extreme water conditions or weather conditions. So that's really, really the biggest challenge that the corals at the moment face. Again, what we do with our work, we initiate the healing process by placing these structures, attaching the corals, boost them with the electricity, so they can have a head start and even fight through a harsh, stressful time like hot water, and hopefully come up with offspring that are stronger than the parents, and meaning that they can adapt, and in the near future there will be still, obviously the long future as well, hopefully there will still be coral reefs that we can enjoy from.
We have been talking a lot about corals, but why are corals reefs so important? And I think you mentioned it before, but maybe there are other reasons. Why are they dying?
You have to imagine the coral reefs, they cover, I think it's 0.02% of the ocean itself, but yet they host 25% of all the biodiversity in the ocean. That number itself is just staggering, and the importance of it speaks for itself. The main importance, food security, because if you don't have corals, there will be no fish. If you don't have fish, people will be hungry. And especially in developing countries, fish directly from the ocean is an important source of protein in people's diet. People that live with $1 or $2 a day, they have nowhere else to go than to the ocean and get a fish out. Everybody wants to eat, and obviously their family too. We have coastal protection, a healthy coral reef, a little bit outside of a shore, picks up over 90% of surge and wave energy. So if you have a storm, if you have just a stronger current, and with the heating of the ocean, the currents will become stronger and faster. Also, the levels of oceans rising then means that the energy that goes directly to the shore will destroy complete shorelines. So a healthy coral reef is protecting shorelines, hence human lives and properties like hotel chains and beaches, and which leads to the next point, tourism. It's a huge part of the tourism industry, and not just snorkeling and diving, but also, a healthy beach is because there's a healthy coral reef out there. And people go places where there's healthy reef because of, the diversity. Diversity is the next point. It's important to have a high diversity in the ocean because that strengthens the survival rates. And there's a lot of, medical research going on, like AIDS and cancer research. A lot of the resources that are used come from coral and coral reefs that are now being used to research in finding cures for cancer and AIDS. Yeah, that's basically that. These are the main reasons. So people, like scientists, put that in numbers because that's always important to put it in numbers. It's basically the coral reef, the 0.02% that cover the ocean, produce an annual value of $30 billion.
Whoa.
And it's a very high number. The problem is it's not something that you directly get. It's not that you, and that makes me sad and mad at points, because if somebody comes up with an idea, just a new app that will be able to, deliver something to somewhere, and you just have to click one time, they will find sponsors and donors and investors in the millions. If you want to protect something that is annually worth $30 billion, nobody will write you that check because nobody gets a direct return on investment from it. But the costs that would occur if you take away the environmental services done by coral reefs are so high that it would make sense to protect these coral reefs. If you take away a healthy coral reef that protects the shoreline, let's say that's always been given. So now if all of a sudden the coral reef is not there anymore, the shoreline gets destroyed, hotels will be destroyed, tourism industry collapses, you have losses in the billions for a country. That could lead to a country having major issues and they need to go to the World Bank and get a loan to survive and so on and so forth. But, it doesn't take that much to protect the coral reef. But, as humans, we are very short-sighted. We don't think far ahead. So that's the biggest challenge, I would say.
Going back to your NGO Quarterlife, you mentioned once that the next challenge you are facing is to remain an NGO that does not become just another player in the field of profits for non-profits. Can you explain a bit more about this problem and describe what solutions do you have in mind to approach and avoid this situation?
Another good question. I mean, personally, that's a personal belief. I think there's a lot of philosophers out there that share the same idea. What I don't want is, I don't want to become a huge player. They actually have a name, they're called the bingos, the big NGOs, the bingos. And when I look at them, they're almost, and I don't want to be dropping names or anything, they almost look to me like big corporations, where obviously they have a very good marketing department where they say, hey, you give us money, we'll make sure that the last tiger in the world will be saved, the last whale will be saved. We make sure you just continue to do your work, make sure that you donate us a lot of money. And they raise a lot of money, they create awareness, yes, but that money, does it actually get to protect what we need to be protected? I don't want to get there. I don't want to be one of these large NGOs that just has a huge fundraising department and where the CEO of that NGO doesn't really get involved with the work in the field or on the ground. Yep. That's why I mentioned that before. I always want to be right there in the spot, touching corals. I want to have that, opportunity and privilege to do so. Obviously, I understand that as a small NGO, you're not being taken serious too much. So what I need to do is I need to talk the talk and also walk the walk. I need to make sure that if I get the opportunity to talk to large donors, that they understand that even if we're small, we still have, first of all, very big partners that we work with, and we can pull off large-scale coral restoration. And that is something that is not really being done at the moment. Everybody claims that they know how to do it, but nobody really has done it. Nobody has done hectares of coral restoration or, my gosh, square kilometers. That's my goal. That's my future vision. I want to be able to say in 5 years max that we have the logistical setup to restore corals or start the healing process of square kilometers of coral reef. And we'll make sure that the survival rate is 90% and not just 10%. And so the effort is basically worthless. These are the things that I need to focus on. Obviously, my feet stay on the ground and I don't want to become one of these big players that are in the field. And I'm pretty sure and confident that I will stay true to myself and don't get distracted.
Yeah, that's an important thing. I mean, it's great you have so much impact, and Quarterlife actually managed to make a difference. So if somebody wants to join, what resources do you need, or what skills should I bring along to join hands?
On our website, you can create a profile, and that's always very, very welcomed. So people who really want to be active in the field, they have to go through a set of questionnaires. Obviously, if you are from the field, let's say you're studying marine biology or something similar, that's a plus. If you have experience in diving, let's say you have more than 50 dives, you've dived different places in the world, and you're a good diver underwater, you feel comfortable, that's great. That definitely is a plus as well. So, we have this pool of volunteers, and when we have new projects and we need volunteers to help us out, let's say, attaching corals, placing structures, laying the cables, and so on and so forth, maintaining the nursery, cleaning the corals, and so on and so forth, we reach out to them and we'll make sure they can come and work with us. It's a great experience. Unlike other NGOs, we don't make money out of that. I remember when I was a volunteer, I had the opportunity to become a volunteer, and doing research was very frustrating because all these positions where you can volunteer, they wanted to have money. And you had to pay like enormous sums of money to become a volunteer. And that really, really got on my nerves. So if you volunteer with us, the only thing that we kind of expect from you is getting there, and we'll take care of the rest. Food and housing and insurance and the diving and everything, we'll take care of that. So you can have a great experience volunteering and doing actually something that's important for nature. That's one way to be part of us and to help us out. The other possibility obviously is, and I don't like to do that so much, but it's just part of it, is be a donor, be a sponsor. And obviously you can donate money, you can sponsor a reef, you can sponsor a reef structure, you can sponsor, in whatever form you want to donate to us. The money that we receive from donors, like, somebody says, hey, I'll give you $50, 90% of that will end up directly in the ocean for the corals. We don't use that money for, let's say, overhead costs or salaries or marketing brochures. So no, that money is going straight to the projects. The other costs, like the overhead costs to run our NGO, like the servers and all these things, that we cover with different sources of income.
Okay, why do you choose the oceans?
It's the source. It's the Sylvia Earle. She's one of the greatest ocean advocates in the world. She said, "No blue, no green." And that means if you don't take care of the ocean, the land will suffer. So the ocean is the most important body that will compensate for any changes in climate. We have a stable climate because we have the ocean, and the ocean is not stable at the moment because we are doing this chemical experiment with the ocean by burning fossil fuels and pumping CO2 and methane gas into the atmosphere for 100 years now. And carbon dioxide is a carrier of heat because we burn fossil fuels, cars, oil for electricity, the cows that are, being produced for the meat industry. All this creates carbon dioxide, and that's always related to heat. And we've been pumping heat into the atmosphere, and the ocean now are, been trying to compensate, and they've been doing that. But we're getting to a point where this is oversaturated. So if the ocean gets to a better state, we then can have a more stable climate on land as well. We don't have as many tornadoes anymore. Changes in temperature won't drop from one to the other within a few hours anymore. And we all can be much, much more relaxed and look into a brighter future.
Any recommendation for people who find themselves in a situation similar you encountered yourself in 2008, suffering a burnout or about to do so, feeling they are just working at the wrong place, in the wrong direction, but don't see a way out or don't know how to find the courage to do so or don't want to? Maybe having several people around who depend on them and they just don't dare to quit?
Yes, it's a very difficult situation. I don't know if I would have chosen to do the same if I would have had a family and children or anything alike. The only thing that I had was financial ties. I had where I lived, my car, and financial ties are easily to overcome. You can pay off the debt if you want. You can reduce your spending. All you need is a little bit of discipline. You need to put yourself together a plan that you want to change something, because I'm sure the majority of the people who are going through the motions, like every day, do the same work over and over again, they know deep down somewhere that they're not happy and they would like to change something, but they feel disempowered. They don't feel like they can do that. So the discipline and just believe in yourself, believe in your abilities. You do have skills. And imagine if you have all the time and you wouldn't have to worry about the money, what would you do? What would your talents be? What would inspire you to do something else? Just start that process by imagining and inspire yourself. Maybe read books from people who did that. It can be spiritual leaders and people who left the system, and that can be inspiring, because there's always another way. There's always another way. You just have to be in touch with yourself. You have to be very sensitive to signs that you receive from life. If you send out a wish into the universe that it is truly honest and comes from your heart, the universe will respond to you with signs and directions and guidance, and will lead you to another path that is actually the real path that you're supposed to take. Now we're getting really philosophical here and spiritual, but that it's parallel. These things are necessary. These things are important, and if we just continue to feed the monster, and the monster in this case being the system that takes so much from us, that takes so much from nature and doesn't give back anything, just takes and takes and takes. That actually led to the situation that we are in at the moment. That the destruction of nature is what happened because the system took and doesn't give back. So we need to stop feeding the system. We need to reduce our footprint of carbon dioxide. We need to stop just constantly consume and yeah, that's not good. It's not good. It's not healthy. It's not healthy at all. So we need to stop doing that.
Aki, thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for giving me the possibility to speak.
Of course. The American marine biologist, explorer, author, and lecturer Sylvia Earle, you talked about her before, asked herself once, why is that scuba divers and surfers are some of the strongest advocates of the ocean conservation? And she answered, because they've spent time in and around the ocean, and they've personally seen the beauty, the fragility, and even the degradation of our planet's blue earth. Giraffe Hero Ali Allagholi has seen the beauty and the degradation, and he has done something against it. He stuck his neck out and is still doing something. If you want to support his work, go to Quarterlife.org and support them in any form you can. This was Stick Your Neck Out, the podcast to restore your faith in humanity. I am Jean-Pierre Aguiar Durañona. We are proud to share every week inspirational stories from remarkable individuals. Each giraffe's story is unique, with the underlying theme of overcoming challenges present in all. Take a look at each individual experience, and although each person is different, they all have one thing in common: heroism. We want to hear your stories too. If you'd like to tell us about your frontline hero, visit us at giraffe-heroes.eu. Dear listeners, our nature is at risk through exploitation and climate change. Therefore, the Giraffe Heroes Foundation is fighting for climate adaptation and the regeneration of a healthy environment. We start at community level and with practical skills, naturalizing villages with trees and plants, reinvigorating the bees, teaching the crafts and the arts necessary in our times. With your help, we can give this work a greater impact and make it the start of the paradigm change. We are inviting you to come on board, be part of the struggle of the common goal, to keep the planet a human affair. If you want to be part of it, go please to wemakeit.com, look for our project Climate Adaptation, the Bees and Tree Initiative, and have a look at the great reward you can get while supporting us. Subscribe the podcast so you don't have to look out for us. We'll be coming to you. Join us also on our social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Join us again next week.